Hello dear students, good evening. Welcome to BAJIRAO IAS Academy. Today is 24th April 2024 and today we have few important news articles for our discussion. So before discussing all those important news articles, let's try to discuss yesterday's given practice question. So the question was, consider the following statements about the Model Code of Conduct. So that is also known as MCC, the Model Code of Conduct. So first statement says, the Model Code of Conduct comes into force from the date the election schedule is announced until the date that results are out. First statement is absolutely correct. Second statement, it has no statutory backing. Yes, it has no statutory backing, and the Model Code of Conduct came into effect once the Election Commission of India declares the schedule for the conducting elections, and the Model Code of Conduct is in force till the declaration of the elections. So therefore statement 1 and statement 2 are correct with respect to this question. So we will try to understand briefly what exactly is the Model Code of Conduct. Now we all knew that the Election Commission of India conduct elections for Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha and the state legislative assemblies along with the president and the vice president. So this power of conducting elections is entrusted to the Election Commission of India by Article 324 of the Indian Constitution. And in fact, Model Code of Conduct is announced by the Election Commission of India, or Model Code of Conduct came into force once the election schedule is announced by the Election Commission of India, and this Model Code of Conduct helps in ensuring free and fair elections in India, so that the political parties and the candidates who are contesting elections will not indulge in any malpractices. Secondly, the Model Code of Conduct also ensures that the official machinery by the government will not be used for any other electoral purposes, and the official machinery will not be misused by the elected government. And at the same time, it will ensure that the electoral offences, the malpractices and corrupt practices are prevented by all means, and this is the responsibility of the Model Code of Conduct. And apart from that, the Model Code of Conduct is enforced from the date of the announcement of the election schedule by the Election Commission of India, and it is operational till the process of elections is completed. So therefore this statement that was asked in the question. And during general elections to the Lok Sabha, the Model Code of Conduct will be enforced across the country. However, with respect to conducting elections to any state legislative assembly, then the Model Code of Conduct will be enforced in the state where the elections are being conducted. However, in case of an election that is a by-election, then only in that constituency where elections are held, this Model Code of Conduct would be applicable. And these are some details about the Model Code of Conduct. However, please understand it does not have any statutory backing. So today's practice question is, consider the following statements about the Tobacco Board. So please understand, earlier the UPSC has also asked about the Coffee Board of India. So therefore there are chances that UPSC may ask such questions for your examination. So the Tobacco Board, the first statement says it is a statutory body. Second statement says it functions under the Department of Commerce, Ministry of Commerce and Industry. So which of the above statements is correct? So please answer this question in the comment section, and I will also provide the correct answer in the next lecture. So we have few important news articles for today's discussion. So one by one we will discuss all of them for the exam, in a manner that they will be relevant for your examination. So the first important news article is with respect to the ill impact of junk food on the human health. So toss out the junk food, bring back the healthy food into the plate. So this was the article, and that was given in the Hindu newspaper. So what was the context of this particular article? So the context is that there is a needs to be the people's movement backed by a sincere policy interventions to promote healthy and nutritionally diverse diets and ensure informed food choices. So this is what is actual concern of the others. So please understand, it is said that in India, the junk food has been impacting the health care of the people, especially young people are at the risk of consuming the junk food, and the junk food is very often associated with diseases like cancer and obesity, because please understand this junk food very often consists of a higher levels of fats, especially the trans fats, sugar and salt. So the higher levels of sugar, salt and fats have been posing significant challenges to the health of the people. So therefore, in this context, we must ensure that the healthy diet is maintained by the every individual, so that we will be safeguarded from the non-communicable diseases. And in this respect, what is the role and responsibilities of the government, especially the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India? And at the same time, how can we incentivize any manufacturing unit which has been preparing a healthy food or a healthy diet? So in this context, we will understand all those things in a very detailed manner. So if we can go into this article, so junk food are actually having a low vitamin content because they're very poor in nutrition. Junk food are very poor in nutrition because they have a very low or less mineral content, vitamins and also the fiber. Understand, these vitamins, minerals and fiber are very important for a healthy individual. But on the other hand, in contrary to this, junk foods very often consist of higher calories, fats, salt and sugar and innumerable preservatives. So these are the factors which negatively impact the human health, because these foods are very often categorized as HFSS food. So HFSS foods are high fat, salt and sugars. So they actually pose a significant health risks to the people who have been eating the junk food. However, there was a survey that was conducted with respect to understand to the negative impact of junk food on the human health. So this pan-India survey that was conducted by Center for Science and Environment. So this pan-India survey has actually revealed that 93% of the children are, they ate the junk food. 93% of the children ate the food that was actually packaged, and 68% of the people drink packaged sweetened beverages, so which are soft drinks, and 53% ate these foods at least once in a day. So these categories of the people are at the highest risk of exposing themselves to the negative impact of the junk food. And at the same time, the ultra processed food industry in India has expanded rapidly. Now, if you look at the food processing industry, especially the industry which has been processing the junk food, it has grown enormously according to the survey by the Center for Science and Environment. Now, if you look at the annual growth rate of this industry, it is 13.37% between 2011 and 2021. So it is one of the highest growth rates of the ultra processed food industry. And at the same time, there are also estimates that the ultra processed food industry is predicted to be around $535 billion by the year 2025 and 26. So the food industry has been growing at an enormous pace. But on the other hand, the junk food which is packaged by these ultra processed food industries are not actually meeting the safety norms, and they have several negative consequences on the health of the children, because children and younger aged people are mostly vulnerable, or they're mostly eating the junk food. And at the same time, India has also been experiencing the explosion of the lifestyle diseases. These lifestyle diseases are very often called as non-communicable diseases. So there is a difference between communicable diseases and non-communicable diseases. So these non-communicable diseases are not contagious in nature, And secondly, these non-communicable diseases actually share around 60% of the total disease burden in India. So if I can tell you about this non-communicable diseases, one such example is the cardiovascular diseases, okay, such as heart stroke, obesity. So those diseases are non-communicable diseases, and junk food directly and indirectly have been contributing for the growth of these non-communicable diseases. So in fact, the Indian Council of Medical Research, it has published a study in the year 2023. And this study by the Indian Council of Medical Research has actually revealing that there is a higher prevalence of metabolic disorders, and that is around 11% diabetes, 35% of hypertensive, and 40% are actually suffering from the abdominal obesity. Because these non-communicable or lifestyle diseases have also been associated with several other negative health related consequences. So this is what the survey by the Indian Council of Medical Research has actually been revealing about the junk food. So in this context, recently the Supreme Court of India has given one such directive, and we also very often talked about Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. I hope you all know about Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. It deals with right to life and personal liberty. However, the Supreme Court over a period of time has been gradually including new rights into the Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. So recently, Supreme Court has also included the right to live, or right against the climate change, has also been included as part of the Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. In a similar way, in earlier judgments, so the Supreme Court has said that any food article which is hazardous or injurious to the public health is a potential danger to the fundamental right to life guaranteed under the Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. Supreme Court is very clear about this, because a food is adulterated and food is not meeting the safety norms or safety standards, then the food must violate Article 21 of the Indian Constitution, because it violates the right to life of the citizen or individual. So because of that reason, the Supreme Court has expressed its views on the adulterated, contaminated food of low quality food, which is violation of Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. However, in this respect, in order to ensure that these junk foods actually not impacting the health of the younger generations, and at the same time these foods also meet the required standards such as vitamins, fiber content and minerals, the government has undertaken several measures in this regard. So what are those measures? We will understand one by one gradually. Government of India actually prioritized the promotion of healthy foods, and for the purpose of promoting the healthy foods and also changing the lifestyles of the people away from the junk food, so the government of India has launched Eat Right India campaign. So Eat Right India campaign is to ensure everyone takes a healthy food, everyone consumes a healthy food. But on the other hand, the Fit India movement was launched by the government to change or modify the lifestyles of the people through the new initiatives. So these two schemes, those are Eat Right India campaign and Fit India movement. So they were actually launched by our Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and in fact these two are part of a holistic nutrition, that is Poshan 2.0 program of the government. So the Poshan 2.0 of the government will essentially focus on the nutrition security of the people, especially the young children, and at the same time reducing the levels of anemia among the young girls, pregnant and lactating mothers. So these are some of the objectives of Poshan 2.0, and Eat Right India and Fit India movement are actually part of the Poshan 2.0 program. So this Poshan 2.0 actually aims to transform the nutrition status of children who aged from 0 to 6 years of age. So please understand, the children who are in the 0 to 6 years of age group, they are vulnerable to various health related problems, and at the same time the age group 0 to 6 years should also require adequate amount of nutrition, because that impacts their growth and learning outcomes in the future. So Poshan 2.0 program essentially focuses on the children who are in the age group of 0 to 6 years, and at the same time pregnant women and the lactating mothers across India. So because the pregnant women and the lactating mothers have also been facing the problem of iron deficiency, so because of that reason it is very important that we must be able to protect our children. So total of 6 lakh 86,430 beneficiaries have been registered under the Poshan Tracker program to ensure the holistic nutrition to all those targeted populations by the government. And in fact, the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India has also released the Food Safety and Standards Safe Food Balanced Diets for Children in School Regulations 2020. So these regulations were released by the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India, and these particular regulations actually restricting the sale of high fat, salt and sugar content food in school canteens, mess premises and hostel kitchens. Because please understand, I've already explained you that high fat, salt and sugar content foods actually poses a significant health risks to children. So therefore these regulations by the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India have been preventing or restricting the sale of high fat, salt and sugar content food in canteens, mess premises, hostel kitchens or within the 50 meters of the school campus, so thereby protecting the health of the children from the junk food. However, in this respect the government has a vision. So what was the vision of the government? So the starting point of the government is to protect the growing children from the harmful impact of the junk food, and this is the first and primary objective of the government. So because junk food impacts the health of the children, so therefore in this context we must protect children from the harmful effects of junk food. So the Food Safety and Standards Authority of India goes ahead and defines what exactly constitutes this high fat, salt and sugar foods, especially for the Indian context, because it is very important that we must define what exactly constitutes high fat, sugar and salt content food. So that could enable the better implementation of food safety regulations across India, thereby preventing the junk food entering into the market which is poor quality and which is having adulterated and which is having a lower minerals, lower vitamins and lower fiber content. Now in this context, what should be the way forward that we must understand here? So policies can also be developed to facilitate the positive subsidies. So there is a need to develop the positive subsidies for the healthy foods, because when we provide subsidies to the companies which produce healthy foods, and there is a scope that those companies will not produce junk food, or they go away from the junk food and produce the healthy foods, because the government has been providing subsidies. And the healthy foods category include whole foods, millets, fruits and the vegetables, because these subsidies will encourage more and more food processing industries to come up in these food sectors, in these different categories of foods, and they will improve the availability of the food, affordability of the food, and thus a greater consumption in rural and urban areas can be achieved by this. So apart from that, there are certain other things that we must do here in this context in order to reduce the availability of junk food. So there is a need for a behavioral change campaign. For example, the government has launched Eat Right India campaign. So this Eat Right India campaign will also significantly enhance the awareness about the junk foods and the healthy foods. So therefore, it could certainly bring a behavioral change and the attitudinal change among the people. However, the targeted group must be children and the individuals who are at the younger age, such as adults, because these the people in this age group, they actually play a critical role in helping the youth about a healthy dietary habits and mindful eating practices. And after that, it is a critical thing to acknowledge the urgency of switching to healthier diets and creating the public demand. So Prime Minister Narendra Modi actually calls it a Jan Andolan, or a people's movement for a healthy and nutritionally diverse diets. So on this image, you can see the junk food and the healthy food, the advantages of a junk food and the disadvantages of a junk food, and advantages of a healthy food and disadvantages of a healthy food. So go through all these advantages and disadvantages. And next article is with respect to the inequality that is prevalent in India. Now, if you look at the Oxfam survey on inequality in India, so it has released the data with respect to the inequality in India. However, the data is shocking. So why it is shocking? Because the top 1% of the wealthy people own around 30 to 40% of the national wealth. So this is particularly shocking. But on the other hand, the bottom 50% of the poor population own less than 10% of the national wealth. So this is a very shocking that the inequalities have been growing at a faster pace, especially after the LPG reforms. So the liberalization, privatization and globalization reforms. Now we'll understand this context of this article. The World Inequality Lab has published a working paper. So the working paper was Income and Wealth Inequality in India in the year 1922 to 2023. And the name of this a working paper is The Rise of Billionaire Raj. So that is the exceptional growth of number of billionaires in India. And this has been highlighting the alarming levels of income, wealth inequality in India. And at the same time, it also posing significant challenges to economic growth and human development. So because please understand, the wealth should not be concentrated in the hands of few people. Rather, the wealth must be distributed equitably across the different sections of the society, and that is how we can achieve the inclusive growth and development in any country or any society. So when the wealth is concentrated in just few hands, so then you are creating a huge inequalities within the society, and those huge inequalities would very often create conditions for the social unrest in the country. So therefore, we must take care of the inequalities, the wealth inequalities, economic inequalities and the regional inequalities, because Indian Constitution, the directive principles of state policy have also talked about the reducing the concentration of wealth in the few hands. And now in this context, we will understand the data with respect to the income and wealth inequalities that were prevalent in India and what are the trends with respect to income and wealth inequality. So this working paper has actually revealed that India's top 1% of the people, for example, all the top earning people have received 22.6% of the total national income in the financial year 22-23. And in fact, this is one of the highest in the century, with the top 0.1% earning around 10% of the total wealth. And secondly, the wealth is actually concentrated in the few hands, because the top 1% actually own around 40.1% of the national wealth. So that is actually a huge 40%, 1% of the national wealth is in the hands of just 1% of the country's wealthy population, while bottom 50% and middle 40% witness a decline in their health wealth share. So this is a very similar to rich becoming more rich and poor becoming more poor. Now there are also a stark wealth inequalities that are significantly growing. Now if you look at India's wealth inequality, so even though it is not that much extreme as Brazil and South Africa, because Brazil and South Africa have the highest levels of the wealth inequality. However, in India, the problem is increasing income inequality. So please understand the difference between income inequality and the wealth inequality. Now, if you look at the total wealth of the nation is concentrated, the 40% of the wealth is concentrated in the hands of just 1%. But on the other hand, the income inequality is also, deteriorating, because top 1% has been receiving 22.6% of the national income. And in this image also you can clearly see that top 1% would receive would own all this land that is marked here, and next 9% would own this land. The bottom 10% would own this, and 50% would own this land. So this is how the stark inequalities that were prevalent in the society. So impact of economic reforms and growth. So yes, it is true that there were a sharp economic inequalities and the wealth inequalities. However, there is a need for economic reforms and growth. So they actually ensure that we, to a certain extent, reduce the existing inequalities in wealth and income. Okay, so inequality actually began rising post the LPG reforms, liberalization, privatization, and globalization. Especially from 1980s onwards, we have seen the growing trend of increasing income inequalities. However, after 1991 LPG reforms, the income inequalities and wealth inequalities have been accelerated at a much faster pace. And this income inequalities and wealth inequalities have actually undermining the growth and the poverty reduction efforts of the government. And after that, we should talk about the economic inequalities that were prevalent in the society as well, because India's growth trajectory, unlike China's growth, has been characterized by the extreme economic inequality despite the moderate growth rates. Now, if you compare India's growth rate with the Chinese growth rate, now what you can observe is that we have been registering moderate growth rate, but on the other hand, we have a sharp income and wealth inequalities that are being prevalent. But on the other hand, it is not the case with the China. However, the states and the government at the central level must prioritize the human development. So that is very important, because states with the highest states sustained higher economic growth rates and economic development, which have actually invested in the human resources development. Now if you look at Kerala, which is the state with the highest human development, followed by Maharashtra and even Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat, Karnataka, so they have been investing in the human resources. So when they are investing in the human resources, there is a chance that it will provide equal opportunities for all the sections of the society, and that could further reduce the existing income inequalities and economic inequalities. So because of the investments in human resource development, we can see the lesser economic inequalities and wealth inequalities in those southern states. And therefore, in order to achieve the inclusive growth, we must prioritize human development in our country. And after that, human development poses certain challenges, and there are certain policy implications which are also required. Now, what are the challenges? So we all knew that India is the 5th largest economy in terms of the GDP. So recently, India surpassed UK as the 5th largest economy. However, if you look at India's human development progress, India still lags behind some of its neighbors such as Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. So this is actually something that India must work on, because if you look at the Human Development Index that is being released by United Nations Development Program, India still ranks below Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, even though India is the fifth largest economy in the world, and that is where we need to work on. However, we must prioritize certain things to reduce income inequalities and wealth inequalities, and also increase our rank in the Human Development Index. So we must focus on economic growth, so there is no doubt about that, but we must prioritize human development along with the economic growth, because economic growth along with the human development will ensure inclusive growth in our country, as economic inequality impedes the overall progress of our country. And in this respect, we require more and more innovative schemes from the governments. Schemes like Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana. So yes, it has been providing short-term relief, but it is actually insufficient to address the huge inequalities that are existing in the society. So therefore, from the government side, from the supply side, we require a more innovative schemes, and those innovative schemes must address the economic inequalities and the poverty of the people. So one best solution would be investing in the human development or human resources development, and that actually holds a lot of potential in reducing income inequalities as well as the wealth inequalities in our country. So the next important news article is with respect to the India's insurance sector and insurance penetration. Now if you look at India's total insurance penetration, so it is said that a moderate level of insurance penetration. Not all people have the insurance, the health insurance. However, in a country like India, where the out-of-pocket healthcare expenditures are very high, we must have a solid and a strong health insurance architecture. So this health insurance architecture would protect the people from the sudden shocks, and at the same time it would also prevent people escaping into the poverty cycle. So one such program that the government has launched to provide insurance for the people, so that is PM Jan Arogya Yojana. PM Jan Arogya Yojana. So this PM Jan Arogya Yojana program was launched by the government, central government, or PM Ayushman Bharat program. It was launched by the central government, and the overall objective of this particular program is providing 5 lakh rupees of health insurance to every household, every rural or urban poor households, thereby securing them from the unintended health shocks and at the same time reducing the out-of-pocket expenditure that they have been facing. So recently the Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority of India actually directed the insurance providers to extend health insurance coverage to senior citizens above the age of 65 years. And this has been acknowledging the demographic shifts that are taking place and need for a broader access to the health insurance. Okay, so now earlier the citizens who are above 65 years of age will not be covered under the insurance segment. But the Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority of India in recent order or direction has asked the insurance provider to extend the health insurance coverage to the senior citizens who are above the 65 years of age. Now we are going through a demographic shift. Demographic shift in the sense that we have the population with the highest or youngest population. So that is demographic dividend. So however, over a period of time, there is a chance that the senior citizens, so the old age population would significantly increase, and old age population requires a healthcare insurance, and that is very, very important here. So Recognizing these demographic shifts, the Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority of India had asked all insurance providing companies to extend health insurance to citizens who are above 65 years of age, so that will help them ensure access to healthcare insurance. Now, how the demographic changes have been impacting the health insurance access, so we will understand this briefly. Because now if you look at India's population, so that is estimated to rival China's population. Now India is the largest populous country in the world with around 142 crore people. Okay, so India has also surpassed China as the world's largest population, and India is now going through a major demographic shift. So demographic shift in the sense that the senior population or older population number will increase over a period of time, or it will be projected to increase in the coming 1 decade or 2 decade. So therefore, increasing the old age population is actually a concern, because people above 65 years of age will not be covered under the health insurance. So in this context, recognizing these demographic shifts, access to healthcare for the people who are above 65 years of age, and making the medicine affordable for all, and at the same time significantly strengthening the caregiving infrastructure for seniors is actually a concern in both developed and developing countries. Especially a country like India, we must look after the access to healthcare, affordability of healthcare, and strengthening the healthcare infrastructure. So that is very, very important, particularly with respect to the demographic shifts that have been taking place in India. However, the recent IRDA IAS directive, that is Insurance Regulatory Development and Authority of India, so directive aims to address the exclusion of the senior citizens from the health insurance coverage, because as I have already explained you that the senior citizens who are 65 years age are excluded from the healthcare coverage by the insurance companies. So therefore, this particular directive acknowledge the need for the broader access to healthcare of the senior citizens in the scenario of changing demographic shifts. However, there are certain challenges with respect to the affordability and access of health insurance. So what are the affordability challenges? Because the health insurance policies are increasingly expensive, or they're becoming more and more expensive with respect to age, and therefore they pose a significant challenges for senior citizens. Because for example, imagine that a candidate or an individual and whose age is 23 years, and if he has taken a term insurance, his premium would be around 600 rupees per month for 1 crore term policy. However, if a person has taken a term insurance at the age of 30 years, then he must pay around 950 rupees premium for a term policy of 1 crore. Now you can imagine, if a person joined or takes a health insurance policy or term policy or any other policy at the age of 65, then they have to pay higher premiums. How can they bear the higher premiums every month? And that is particularly a challenge. And after that, the existing family floater plans cater to a small percentage of India's economic elite alone. Because if you look at the insurance companies, they mostly focus on the small bracket of economic elite, and that has significantly left behind seniors without the affordable health insurance policies. Not just affordable, but it should be accessible for the every citizen of our in our country, mostly the vulnerable sections. So merely broadening the eligibility without addressing the above mentioned challenges such as affordability and accessibility of the healthcare insurance would actually leads to the proliferation of unaffordable health insurance policies for the people in those targeted age groups. So these challenges must be addressed, and apart from that, there is a necessity for upgrading the healthcare infrastructure in our country. So for that, we must ensure, or we must shift from the traditional caregiving practices. Okay, so there's no doubt that India has been reaping the demographic dividend. We must do more to reap this demographic dividend. However, the demographic dividend in India's workforce actually necessitates a shift away from the traditional caregiving structures for the aged. So this is also one factor that we must look into. And after that, we must strengthen our infrastructure. We must make strong investments in our infrastructure. So extending insurance coverage must be accompanied by a substantial investments in affordable healthcare infrastructure, because when we strengthen our existing healthcare infrastructure along with providing insurance coverage to the targeted populations, then it could significantly reduce the out-of-pocket expenditures of the people who are the vulnerable, and at the same time the insurance would be accompanied, or the insurance would be very often complemented by the affordable healthcare access provided by the hospitals. And at the same time, we must upgrade the healthcare. For that, lessons from South Indian states actually underscore important upgrading in the healthcare, so that will meet the needs of the aging population of our country. So for this, we must look into increasing the coverage of the different age groups of people in the insurance, or providing them the insurance, not just insurance coverage, but we must make sure that the insurance is affordable and accessible for those segments of population. And at the same time, we should also focus on rapidly upgrading our healthcare infrastructure. So the next important news article is that in Vietnam, farmers reduce methane emissions by changing how they grow rice. So please understand, rice is one of the most important tropical crop, and rice is also one of the significant contributor of the global methane emissions. Now this methane is actually a greenhouse gas, and that is also contributing for the increasing global temperatures, thereby the climate change. And if you look at countries like India, so the rice fields are one of the major producers of the greenhouse gas such as methane. Now before discussing about different types of greenhouse gases, we'll understand first greenhouse gases. So the carbon dioxide, so this is also a greenhouse gas, and the greenhouse gas potential of carbon dioxide is 1. Okay, so it has a lesser potential, and the major sources of carbon dioxide include fossil fuel combustion and deforestation. And after that, methane, also the major greenhouse gas, and its potential is 25, and it is being produced from rice paddy fields, landfills, digestive traces of cattle and sheep. So the poultry industry and the dairy farming also releases methane into the environment along with the paddy fields. So after that, the nitrous oxide is also potential greenhouse gas, and it has the highest potential, and it is being released from fertilizer and animal waste. Hydrofluorocarbons, so their potential is 14,800, and they are being released from semiconductor manufacturing and other industrial processes. Perfluorocarbons, and their greenhouse gas potential is 12,200, same as hydrofluorocarbons plus aluminum smelting. And sulfur hexafluoride SF6, so it has one of the highest greenhouse gas potential, and electrical transmission system, magnesium and aluminum production are the major sources of the sulfur hexafluoride. Now these are the greenhouse gases, and methane is being released from the paddy fields. And now Vietnamese farmers have been adopted the innovative farming that could reduce the methane emissions into the atmosphere, thereby reducing the green global warming. Okay, so farmers in Vietnam adopted an innovative technique to reduce methane emissions by changing how they grow rice. Now, so about this innovative technique, what was this innovative technique? So that could reduce the emission of methane into the atmosphere. So in fact, flooding the fields with the water, or regularly wetting the fields with the water, is actually responsible for the release of methane into the atmosphere, because when we flood the fields with the water, so that could create an anaerobic conditions, and that could produce a large quantities of methane into the atmosphere. Okay, so the farmers in Vietnam have been using a different method of irrigation, and that irrigation method is known as alternate wetting and drying method. Okay, so this irrigation method, alternative wetting and drying method, is being used by the farmers in Vietnam. And this alternative wetting and drying method actually requires less water than the traditional paddy farming, because the paddy fields are not continuously submerged, and they also produce lesser methane. And apart from that, drones are being used by the farmers to spray the fertilizer, and that could save a lot of labor costs as well. And after that, so they have also been effectively using the stubble in the field. Now if you look at India, the stubble is very often burnt on the field itself. But on the other hand, the farmers in Vietnam have been using the stubble effectively. So the rice stubble is no longer burnt on the fields, and if we burn the stubble on the field, that could contribute to the air pollution, but rather the stubble is being used as a livestock feed for growing straw and other mushrooms. Now, how rice can contribute to the climate change? We will understand this briefly, because rice crop is not just vulnerable to climate change but also produce or contributes uniquely to it. Okay, so it essentially means that the rice crop also results in climate change. Okay, so it also contributes to the climate change and global warming. And apart from that, it also uses excessive amount of labor and the water resources as well, because rice has to be grown separately from other crops, and the seedlings have to be individually planted in these flooded fields. If you look at these fields are flooded, and this involves a lot of work, and this also requires a lot of water resources. And water stress is because of excessive extraction of the water resources to flood the fields with the water. So thereby we must reduce the use of water in the rice field, and alternative wetting and drying is one such technique which could significantly reduces the amount of water resources that we use in the paddy fields. And if we inundate or flood the fields with the water, so it could stop oxygen from entering into the soil. Oxygen cannot enter into the soil. Now that could create conditions for methane producing bacteria in these soils, because oxygen cannot enter the soil. And in fact, according to an estimate, it is said that the rice fields have been contributing to the 8% of all human-made methane in the atmosphere, and it is one of the significant greenhouse gas. So therefore, farmers in India should also look for the alternatives and innovative approaches that could reduce the usage of water and usage of labor, and at the same time increases their productivity by using the alternative wetting and drying technique along with the drones as well. So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. Please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button, and we will meet in the next lecture. Thank you.